Recently, a channel by the name of Petscop has been gaining attention, and so far, its story seems very intriguing. The channel features a person by the name of Paul, who claims to have found an unfinished PlayStation game called Petscop. The videos on his channel consist of him playing through the game and encountering all the eerie events that happen with it. The series is very captivating, so I just want to analyze some of the information we know so far. Before we begin looking at some of the footage from Petscop, we should first establish what exactly Petscop is. Petscop is a PlayStation 1 game that was created in 1997 by a company named Garalina, which to my knowledge does not actually exist. The main goal of the game is to catch pets that are scattered throughout the game. It still isn't entirely known what the word Petscop means. Some believe it is a combination of the words pets and cop, because you are policing the pets to catch them in a way. Others believe it is a combination of the word pet and scop. The word scop has ties to words such as scold and abuse. This could make a connection between the game and the theme of child abuse, which we'll be looking at more in depth later on. Now let's take a look at the gameplay. This is the character that Paul plays as. No one is really sure what this sprite is supposed to be portraying, and at first, we aren't even sure of its identity, or if it even has one. It is noted that the sprite does not have any arms, and consequently, cannot open any doors. This game starts out in what is called the gift plane. Some believe the gift plane is a reference to heaven because of the cloud-like floor and the pink buildings. In addition, the gift plane is entered through what could be perceived as a gate, which could represent the gates of heaven. Further in the game, there are more references to support this hypothesis, but we will get to that later. The gift plane seems to be one of the unfinished portions of the game, since there's only one building, and continuing down the road will lead to the road just disappearing. According to a sign at the beginning, there were supposed to be 8 buildings. The first and only level which can be accessed through the gift plane is called Even Care. Most of the pets we have seen so far can be caught on this level. The first pet is Amber. She can be caught by opening her cage, making her jump to the other cage, and then locking herself in the now empty cage. She will then jump into the cage with you, and then you will catch her. The second pet is Roneth. Paul is unable to figure out how to catch Roneth, but we still have a little information on this pet. Roneth seems to be a hybrid between Tonith and Randis, who we will talk about later. For one, Roneth has the head of Tonith and the body of Randis. Also, the name Roneth is a combination of Tonith and Randis, so a lot of people believe Roneth is the child of Tonith and Randis. The third pet we encounter is Pen. He is caught by setting the number on the right to 7, and then stepping onto the piano key. All we know about this pet is that it has no legs and appears to be holding a snowball in its hand. The final 2 pets we encounter in Even Care are Randis and Wavy. Wavy is a rain cloud that follows Randis, the flower, wherever she goes. To catch them, you have to put the bucket on the same spot they will teleport to, and when they teleport there, Wavy will fill up the bucket, and Randis will be rendered unable to move because of the lack of water. After this, Paul is able to catch them both. After all these pets are caught, we get to the part where the game takes a dark turn. Paul mentions a note that he found with the game that says, "I walked downstairs, and when I got to the bottom, instead of proceeding, I turned to the right and became a shadow monster man." The bottom half of the note has a date reading June 13th, 1997, and then it says, "For you. Please go to my website on the sticker, and also go to Roneth's room, and press start, and press down, 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 right, start." The website mentioned in the note has not yet been revealed by Paul. Some people believe this note was written by 2 different people. It is speculated that the top half of the note could have been written by a child because it's in all caps and has some grammatical errors, plus the phrase "Shadow Monster Man" seems childish. The bottom half of the note, people speculate to have been written by the game developer because the instructions imply he knows a lot about the game. Paul does as the instructions say and enters the keys down, 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 right, start. Upon doing this, the music stops. Paul leaves the building, which leads him to another part of the game known as the Newmaker plane. Many people believe the Newmaker plane is a representation of purgatory. One of the first locations we come across in the Newmaker plane is the office. And here, Paul receives a phone call saying, "Care has left the room." In addition, there's a note here saying ABNLM. This serves as an introduction to the character known as Care, who we will learn much more about later on. Later on, Paul comes across a tombstone with the name Michael Hammond written on it, and dates indicating he was 6 or 7 years old when he died. Doing a quick Google search will show that the Michael Hammond mentioned in this game is probably not based off a real person. It is important to note that on the tombstone, it also says he was a gift, which even further supports the theory that the gift plane represents heaven and that Michael resides there. Next to Mike's tombstone is a room with a crying girl in it, who most people assume to be Care. Next to this room is a room with a giant flower in it. Paul begins plucking away the petals of the flower, and once all of them are gone, he goes back to see Care, and her sprite is now heavily distorted. Not long after this, we are introduced to a pretty important object in the game. This object is known as Tool, and Paul is able to ask it questions. Most questions he asks just yield the default response of "I don't know." Later on, he does ask questions which yield a different response, but we'll get to that later. After this, Paul looks out some type of window behind the Tool and sees a windmill. After exiting the screen, the Tool tells him to keep looking at the windmill. He goes back and stares for about 2 minutes straight, but nothing happens, so he leaves. Further on down the line, Paul encounters the Quitter's Room. This room is essentially just a bedroom that is split by a mirror. Paul seems to be on the opposite end of the mirror, and on the other side, there's a reflection with a different face that mimics whatever he does. There are 2 things I need you to remember about this room that will be important later. One is the name of the room, Quitter's Room, and second is the note that can be found in the room that reads, "Do you remember being born?" These will be important to remember for later. In the third Petscop video that Paul uploads, he comes across a pretty significant room known as the Child Library. This room has a canvas where a face can be drawn on it. Depending on the face that is drawn, a different room will be able to be accessed. Drawing a random face on the canvas would have caused the room to be set to some generic children room that doesn't seem to have too much significance. I'm not sure if each of these generic rooms are unique or not, but there are 288,000 possible combinations for the faces on the canvas, so that's a lot of rooms. Remember the faces we saw earlier on Mike's tombstone and on the outside of where Care was located? These are the faces that are important to draw on the canvas. Paul first draws Mike's face on the canvas and is greeted with a message saying, "Mike is not inside right now. He is dead. You may visit his room." Inside of Mike's room, there appears to be a small version of the red Tool and a pair of tweezers on his nightstand. Next, Paul drew Care's face on the canvas. This presented him with a message saying, "Care is missing. You may visit her room." On Care's nightstand, there appears to be a small version of the red Tool and a box of crayons. Finally, there's a note in here that says, "Your wife says Care isn't growing eyebrows." You say, "That's a puzzle." You're secretly very excited to hear the news. You're in the bathtub thinking about her. I have a guess at which child you'll pick next. When you find her room, the passage to my right will lead to her. She'll appear from the darkness, limping, and I'll shoot her in the head. Tiara says, young people can be psychologically damaged beyond rebirthing. A young person walks into your school building. They walk in with you. You're holding their hands. They come out crying into their hands because nobody will love them, not ever again. Nobody loves me. They wander the Newmaker plane. This note brings up one of the first occurrences of 3 key words that are repeated a few times throughout the game. One of them is Newmaker, the other one is Tiara, and the other one is rebirthing. Many people believe that Newmaker is a reference to a girl who was adopted and named Candace Newmaker. The word tiara also relates to this because her original name was Candace Tiara Elmore. Candace was going through therapy with her adoption mother to treat her reactive attachment disorders. Part of this therapy included what was called rebirthing therapy. For this therapy, they wrapped Candace in a flannel sheet to simulate the womb and told her to fight her way out of it to get free. Candace was unable to get free, and several times she told them she couldn't breathe. Still, they wouldn't let her out and told her to die if she couldn't get out. Eventually, Candace suffocated to death. Other references to this would be in the quitter's room that I mentioned earlier, since the therapist called Candace a quitter during the therapy session. Also, there was a note which said, "Do you remember being born?" which seems to be a reference to the rebirthing therapy. The Candace Newmaker reference, along with the note found on Care's room, and the dead child, Michael Hammond, all seem to back up the theory of this game having the theme of child abuse. Even at the beginning of the game, some child abuse connections can be made. The first pet Paul catches, Amber, was trapped in a cage. There have been multiple cases of children with reactive attachment disorder being trapped inside of cages. Randus was caught by being deprived of water. There are also cases of children with reactive attachment disorder being punished by depriving them of food and water. Even Wavy, who was caught by catching the water in a bucket, could be a reference to child abuse. Some children are punished by being force-fed water. In the fourth Petscop video, Paul discovers what he believes to be a camera. This would be what allowed him to view the windmill that he saw in Petscop 2. According to this, the camera should be pointing in the direction of the windmill. However, when Paul follows the direction of the camera, there only seems to be some sort of platform in place of where the windmill should be. In Petscop 5, Paul discovers some more questions he can ask Tool that will actually yield a response. One is, "Where is Tiara?" which responds with, "Petscop kid very smart." The next one is, "Who am I?" which responds with, "Newmaker." Next is, "Where am I?" which responds with, "Under the Newmaker plane." Afterward, he asks, "Who are you?" to which it responds with, "Tool." Finally, he asks Tool, "Remember being born?" and it responds with, "I'm not Tiara," which even further supports the connection of this game with Candace Newmaker. Strangely enough, at one point when asking these questions, Tool turns pink. When he asks it, "Who are you?" in its pink state, it responds with, "Turn off PlayStation." When he asks it why, it responds with, "Marvin picks up Tool, hurts me when PlayStation on." After this, the Tool turns red again. The Tool changing colors has brought up some confusion with people investigating this. One theory for why the color changes is something called the color theory. This theory states that certain colors are used to reference certain characters. For example, Michael Hammond's name is written in pink on his tombstone. The color blue can be associated with Care's mother in the note found in her room. The color yellow is associated with Care because her name is written in yellow in the note in her room. The husband in the note is green because of the green text in his quote. And Tiara is associated with purple because her name is written in purple. If these colors are correct, then that would lead a lot of people to believe that the pink Tool is actually Michael Hammond speaking. This is further backed up by the improper grammar used by him, which would indicate a child speaking. So, if this is true, then Michael is telling Paul to turn off the PlayStation because Marvin hurts him with the tool. This is the first reference of Marvin, but we can obviously assume he is an abusive character. He might even be the husband mentioned in the note in Care's room. Another important thing to note is that in the room with Tool, there are several drawings of a blue Tool. Once again, if the color theory is correct, then blue corresponds with Care's mother. Maybe at one point, we will be introduced to a blue Tool, which will be Care's mother speaking to Paul. In Petscop 6, Paul decides to investigate the windmill a little bit more. This time, he stares at it for 2 hours and 39 minutes. At this point, a silhouette figure walks behind the windmill and makes it spin in the opposite direction, and then walks toward the camera. He turns the camera and then spells out a few things. "Where is my house? Where is the school? And I will follow," We can also see a new pet, Tonith, on the screen. After this, the camera turns back to the windmill. An hour and 24 minutes later, the windmill disappears again. Let's talk about the silhouette character for a moment. This character looks almost the same as the character that Paul is playing as, except it has wavy hair, or a horn as some people see it. When this silhouette begins writing things out, it spells a few things incorrectly at first. This has led some people to believe this character is a child. In addition, because the spelling wasn't all caps, it's possible this character is the same person who wrote the note that Paul found earlier. In that note, whoever wrote it said that they became the Shadow Monster Man. Well, this character is essentially just a shadow, so maybe they are the Shadow Monster Man. Paul ends up going back to where the camera was, and discovers the writing blocks along with Tonith, who he catches. Later on, Paul goes back to the tool and asks it the same questions that the Shadow Monster wrote. First he asks, "Where's my house?" The tool responds, "You'll never go home." Next he asks, "Where is the school?" The tool responds with, "You can't go back in time." In Petscop 7, the most recent video, Paul visits the tool again, which is pink this time, so we can assume this is Michael Hammond speaking. The questions Paul types seem to not really matter here. The tool just says, "I love you, Newmaker. Please show Marvin where his house is. Go there and he'll follow. His daughter is there. Also wants 1,000 pieces for machine beyond school basement stairway." The dialogue scene here actually seems to reveal more about the identity of the Shadow Monster Man. It asks Paul to show Marvin where his house is, and also says that he will follow him. Earlier, the Shadow Monster Man asked where his house was, and said he would follow Paul. So I think it's safe to assume the Shadow Monster Man is Marvin, which would also mean Marvin wrote the note that Paul found earlier. Next, Paul goes back to the room with the canvas, but this time, for the face, he draws Michael's face, without eyebrows, since earlier it was established that Care may be plucking out her eyebrows. This seems to bring up another generic room that does not have much meaning. After that, he draws Care's face, but with eyebrows this time. This brings up a room that has blocks on the table, and then something that is being censored at the moment by a black box. At the end of this video, Paul seems to break character from the story for a little bit with a message. He says that we, indicating the creators of the series, had to censor out the object for a reason we will not know until later. This was the first time that Paul ever broke character in the series so far. And that concludes the series so far. As I said earlier, the series is fictional, but still it's a very interesting story to follow along with. There's much more mystery behind this that I didn't even cover in this video, so I encourage you to do some digging into some of the theories as well. I also recommend you check out the Petscop Comprehensive Progress document on Google Docs. I got a lot of my information from here. I'll leave a link to it in the description. Thank you for watching, and I will see you on the flip side.